Your Excellencies, dear friends, we are coming to our final panel, why the world needs a risk response network. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you an outstanding panel composed by Ngaire Woods, the Professor of International Political Economy, University of Oxford, Heizo Takenaka, Director of Global Security Research Institute, Keio University in Japan, and at the same time a member of the Foundation Board of the World Economic Forum, former Minister of Finance, Marthinus van Schalkwyk, Minister of Tourism of South Africa, Yafei, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the People's Republic of China to the United Nations in Geneva and former Deputy Foreign Minister of China, and Ronald Noble, Secretary General of the International Criminal Police Organization, much better known as Interpol in the world, located in Lyon, France. So you will agree with me, we have an outstanding panel composed by intellectuals, composed by government representatives, international organizations. So let's go immediately. Medias in res, and Ngaire, why don't you share with us why we need, you may also, we are not dictatorial here, you may also say why we do not need a risk response network. And I would suggest that each of you takes about 4 minutes, so it allows afterwards to have a ping pong in terms of intellectual exchange.
Great. Thank you, Professor Schwab, and all the participants and colleagues here. So why might we need a risk response network? I guess the argument that I've heard a lot of, and that I would sort of play back to you in a way from the last 2 days, is that there's 3 things that the world needs to deal with a dizzying array of risks and opportunities. Better cooperation, better information, and better collaboration. So how do we get there? Let me just put four ideas on the table for our discussion this morning. On cooperation, I think the first thing is rebalancing. And we've all been discussing 2 kinds of rebalancing. The first is the rebalancing of global power, which means institutions of cooperation have to change. They have to keep up with a new global power balance. And that means some important reforms to institutions that we have. But the second point, and one which Rick Sammons has been reminding us all of, is the rebalancing of the agenda. Rebalancing the agenda both so that it takes into account the new power balance, but also so that it takes into account the particular straitened economic situation that's now being faced, the imbalances across the world, and the need for a new global social and economic consensus. And I think on this first point, the rebalancing point, the WEF has a very particular role to play in both helping through its multi-stakeholder dialogues, helping push institutions to rebalance, and particularly on the second, in helping forge a new consensus. And that consensus, I think, can help inform the risk network. The second is refocusing. The second point, which is again about international cooperation, is that institutions not only need to be rebalanced, they need to be refocused. And here I think the call from my GAC is first and foremost to the heads of international organizations to say, look, use the powers you have to cut the staff you don't need, to cut the old mandates that you don't need, to cut the old-fashioned reporting that you don't need, and to really focus on what the world needs you to do now. The third point is about information. the world surely needs better information, and this is at the core of the WEF's vision of a risk response network. And I think the discussions across the last 2 days and in preparation for this meeting have all shown an awareness of the dizzying new possibilities for getting information, from Wikipedia to WikiLeaks. Sometimes it's welcome, sometimes it's less by different parties, but we are living in a world where our global cooperation and our national institutions need to update themselves about who they're taking information from and who they're giving clear information to. It's not just about transparency, it's about how you get your information. And I think, again, the WEF has a big role to play in pushing that agenda forward. And the fourth and final is about collaboration. With the dizzying array of possible public-private partnerships, public-private networks, you know, the WEF model gone global, we do need to ask, what are these all about? It's a question Mark Malloch-Brown was putting to my group this morning in robust terms. And I think he put it very well when he said we need to ask, what do these networks or partnerships deliver? And have they been structured to deliver? Or are we all going to get lost in the process? And I think that's a very important thought to bring forward in making the Risk Resilience Network something that really is improving the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngaire. I was struck by your expression of rebalancing, which came up again and again and again. And I think what I hear from many of the participants here, the last 2 days helped also to do some conceptual rebalancing in our minds. We come here with our concepts. We test our concepts with different cultures, different stakeholders. So it's a conceptual rebalancing, which is another outcome of such a meeting. Is there any issue my colleagues in the panel would like to take up in response to Ngaire's presentation? If not, Takenaka-san.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Professor Schwab. He always provokes our thought. This time, he raised the importance of risk response network. We are now going to discuss why this is needed. But honestly, it is very difficult to explain why it is not needed. We now live in a new age of risk, it is needless to say. 10 years ago, in Japan, we had a serious financial crisis. Major banks had carrying huge amount of non-performing loan. We were at the edge of this kind of systemic risk. At that time, I was the Minister for Financial Services. My job was to dispose the non-performing loan. But anyway, as you know, also 2 years ago, we had so-called Lehman shock. This kind of shock, anytime and anywhere, can happen. And impact is very serious, and the speed of this influence is very rapid. We are very much integrated. We are very much interdependent. But anyway, I'd like to introduce one experience in Japan. 15 years ago, we had a very serious earthquake. This hit the city of Kobe, a densely inhabited area. And right after this earthquake, the professionals of disaster reduction got together at that area, and one of my good friends, Mr. Nishimura, took initiative in these discussions. And they discussed very important 4 phases of fighting against this kind of disaster. 4 phases of action. One is prevention and mitigation. This is very important. The second one is preparation or preparedness. This is the second one. And third one is response. And the fourth one is recovery and rehabilitation. Our network should cover all 4 stages, 4 phases: prevention, mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery and rehabilitation. And in order to build this kind of network, first of all, the risk officer community should be established. So what kind of risk community is the best? This is a very debatable issue. But anyway, in my understanding, government or public sector already discussed this kind of issue, and international organization had a very similar discussion. Considering that, what we should focus is how to involve the business community. One of the strengths, biggest strengths of the World Economic Forum is that we have excellent international business community. How to involve the business sector? This must be the most important one to be discussed, considering the risk officer community. And also, as for the content of the product, what actually we should do in this network, I first like to propose some initiative should be considered by each country and by each company even. In 1990s, we had a very good experience. At that time, Prime Minister of Japan, Ryutaro Hashimoto, initiated some kind of movement. This is called Hashimoto Initiative. This is a try to reduce and terminate parasite diseases. We had a very good experience to fight against that. So first of all, we'd like to start with exchanges, some kind of best practices. Each country has its own experience. So it is very, I expect a lot that in this network, we start first with exchange views on what we experienced, running best practices. This will provide a kind of early small success in this network. I appreciate your comments on that.
Thank you, Heizo. Any comment concerning best practices? Not for the moment. Let's come back. Minister, what is from a governmental point of view, your reaction?
I would like to partly respond to the first question that you put and also some of the comments made by my fellow panel members. Over the years, I believe that WEF has carved for itself a very unique place in the international architecture. And I've always felt that it would be very good for more government leaders to be exposed to the way that WEF operates. It is an idea factory, and it challenges one's thinking. And it forces people to come out of their silos, to expose themselves to new ways of thinking. And after listening to the presentation this morning, I said to myself, but this is not just another program. When an organization says it wants to move from insight to impact, it's actually a very significant moment in the life of any organization. And I think one shouldn't underestimate what is happening here. And to take a step back, although all of us or most of us are committed to multilateralism, the truth is internationally multilateral organizations are experiencing serious challenges. In the words of one of our panelists, rebalancing itself. And that is why more and more the vacuums that are being created because of that are being filled by other organizations. Minilateralism is coming to the fore. G7 became G8, later on G20 after G8 plus 5, and there's more pressure to expand that. But also voluntary organizations, BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa. And it is all in an attempt to find answers and challenges and risks that we have to address. And now WEF is saying there's a vacuum. That's how I read it, my own words. How do we fill that vacuum? Now, what is significant here is that I think it's an opportunity for the private sector to play a much more important role in international affairs. There are a number of government institutions. So if I'm in the private sector, I would say to myself, massive opportunity here. If I'm government, I would say to myself, the opportunity is to expose myself to these processes, but there's also a challenge, and I think that is what we will have to, or WEF will have to fine-tune in managing it. We don't want WEF sessions to become endless sessions of negotiations, like government institutions, where we have to have a communique at the end and we start negotiating language, and worst of all, we as governments always have to answer the question of who do we represent, accountability, and that we go back to our groups, G77 and China, G8, G5. But I believe there's a lot of potential in what is being proposed.
Minister, I think you made a very important point. What the forum should do is always taking care of the enlightening aspect and not of the decision-making dimension. We are supportive, even in the charter of the World Economic Forum, it's explicitly mentioned that the forum supports the work of the international organizations. But you make a second point, which is important. What we see now in the world is that the formal system of international organizations is more and more supplemented by what I would call networked systems, focused, purpose-oriented coalitions of people committed to achieve a certain objective. And that's how we see our role in this framework. I also find your comment on the business community is very important because with the crisis, people felt that the pendulum, after the exuberance of business, is swinging back to the governments. But having been at the G20 meeting in Seoul, I have to say it was striking the difference. Business has a much more strategic, I would even say optimistic view, despite all the problems, whereas politicians are so much concentrating on the restraints which form the boundaries of what they can do as concessions in global decision-making. So to have a much more globally oriented audience or stakeholder like business, but also like academia involved, pushing for global solutions, I think is important. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. When we look, when we look at the first 10 years of the new century, I think we can at least identify two things. One is a fast growth of globalization, expansion of globalization, which has brought us huge benefits, increased wealth, interconnectedness through internet, technical innovations, lots of good things. Second thing we notice is an explosion of global challenges, which are full of risks. Some of these risks we do not see they are coming. Some of them are very difficult to tackle. So we are now into a world where the positive side is very striking and the negativities are also extremely great. Why is it? Why are the global challenges so risky? So risky now? Several things come to my mind. Number one is a multiplicity of these challenges, meaning the challenges do not come in isolation. They come as a group, they come all together at the same time and covering various fields. It's not just political, not just security, it's economics, it's in health fields, it's refugees, it's social. It involves land disputes, maritime disputes. It involves outer space, cyberspace. So it's everywhere. I would call it multiplicity of these challenges. Secondly, it's global in nature. Now, it's very difficult to confine a challenge or risk in one particular country, even in a region or in a sector. It's everywhere. For instance, the H1N1 epidemic. Thanks to the quick response of World Health Organization and the efforts of countries involved, we fairly quickly contain it. But it spreads very fast globally. It affects transportation, it affects trade, almost everything. So it's global challenges. Number 3, these challenges are systemic and structural, or carries systemic and structural risks. The financial crisis is a very good example. It reveals a dysfunctional, I would stress dysfunctional, global economic system. We are not out of it yet. Some of the structural issues we found very difficult to tackle. Lastly but not least, these challenges are long-term challenges. They will not be going away overnight. For instance, water shortages, food security, scarcity of energy, cyberspace security, they will be with us for a long, long time. So when we view this, 2 things come to my mind. One is there is a deficit in confidence for all of us. People are not confident anymore. Not confident in the global system, not confident in the ability of governments to work together to tackle these challenges, to reduce these risks. Another deficit is deficit in response. The national mechanism, the regional international mechanism we have in responding to these challenges are not adequate. And not adequate in ideas, not adequate in ways we used to deal with these crises. What to do? Some suggestions. Number 1, these are global challenges. These challenges cut across sectors, disciplines. So we need to have global resolution, global solutions, and integrated approaches. We need to build new consensus and a new global partnership based on new consensus. We cannot afford to have piecemeal approaches or kind of painkiller. I have a headache, I take a painkiller. That's not enough because pain is symptomatic. But people will ask, what is this new type of global partnership? For me, at least we need to have the following elements. 1 is development. We need to pay more attention to the developmental gap between rich countries and poor countries, especially least developing countries. We need to have a new look at the reality of the world. The global network, the global reality is that developing countries are in a position now to contribute more. We need to give them a greater say in setting the agenda of how we are going to go forward. They need to be in a better position to contribute to the global decision-making process. Secondly, we need to have a new concept of security. Security is not anymore a zero-sum game. I'm secure at the expense of your insecurity. We're all in this together. So it has to be based on the principles of mutual benefit, mutual strategic trust, equality, and collaboration. Another thing, at a more macro theoretical level, we need to have a new concept of civilization. We need to respect the diversity of different civilizations. An inclusive and harmonious approach to the relationship among different civilizations. We need to tap into this pool of human wisdom. That wisdom does not only exist in a certain particular civilization, it's everywhere. Thirdly, my suggestion is that we need to improve and reform global governance, provide institutional support for risk reduction. Briefly, for instance, we need to support the United Nations and its specialized agencies, make it more efficient. We need to continue to reform global economic governance structure, International Monetary Fund, World Bank. We need to make G20 work to enhance its legitimacy by linking it with the other 172 countries in the UN system. We need to work together internationally. Lastly, I think we need to increase information sharing, resources sharing in a timely and effective manner. Because when I walk into conferences like this, you see so many people working in different organizations, different mechanisms. We need to work together, sharing information in a timely fashion. Here, I highly recommend or commend the efforts by the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum. Their idea or concept of risk response network is a timely one. We're beginning now to conceptualize and define what it is, and I want to do my share by what I've said above. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador He. Mr. Noble, Secretary General.
Thank you. I'd like to speak not as a law professor at NYU Law School, but give you a real-world perspective as Secretary General. I want to begin by reframing the question from, does the world need one risk response network, to does the world need a variety of interconnected external risk identification and response networks? Why do I propose expanding the concept before it has been formalized, implemented, and even proven successful? I speak to you as Secretary General of an organization that has 188 member countries. I've traveled to 140 of these countries as Secretary General. My travels and my work have taught me one very important, basic, and rather obvious lesson. Our world, the world we share, is diverse. There are 200 or so sovereign countries in the world. Almost 7 billion people live on this planet. Millions of businesses operate all over the world. Almost 7,000 different languages are spoken. Not dialects, but languages. There must be many diverging views on risk. How to identify, how to prepare, and how to respond. As one of our colleagues said, dizzying array of issues to confront. A world as diverse as I've described will view the word risk differently, depending on the individual person, government, business concerned. Recognizing this point only and early on will help to avoid putting together only one network for global risks of a dizzying variety. I want to illustrate this point by providing you with 4 types of risks that Interpol member countries, you and your businesses, confront each and every day. You might not consider them to be strategic or broad, but I assure you they are. Dangerous fugitives or terrorists pose either a direct risk or indirect risk to the safety and security of you and your businesses. There are many police, many private networks, and even citizens who collaborate in sharing information or good practices to deal with that risk. Last week, we were reminded that air transportation continues to be a target of terrorists. Though the successful police cooperation among the Saudis, The Dubai police, UK, and US authorities helped to thwart those attacks. The risk that targeting or threatening to target air passenger and air freight needs to be a risk considered by many of you. Thanks to the visionary leadership of the head of Dubai Police, that risk was reduced by his agreement to share the results of the Dubai Police's investigation about the package, how it looked, the contents, how it was designed, how others could identify it in case they came across them. Fraudulent passports and travel documents is what I consider the #1 global risk confronting us all. The good news is, last year, over 400 million people had their passports screened before crossing borders. 7 years before, it was only a few thousand. From a few thousand to 400 million, you would say, great work, Interpol, great work. Last year, over 500 million people crossed borders internationally as part of air travel without having their documents screened against a global database containing 15 million stolen documents. The risk to any of your businesses or communities of having someone possessing fraudulent documents enter your country, whether it's a terrorist, a person engaged in fraud, a rapist, or murderer, is a risk that could destabilize you, your businesses, and your communities. Finally, and I will conclude here, there's a problem of corruption. And I want to just pause for a minute, Professor Schwab, and thank you for co-authoring the letter encouraging the councils to consider the importance of good governance and preventing corruption in your day-to-day work. No matter what your agenda item is, no matter what your business is, unless you're concerned about good governance and preventing corruption, you and your business run a great risk of failure, a great risk of not being able to deliver the products and services in the best, most efficient, and effective fashion, a risk that the communities that should be developing won't be able to develop like they otherwise would develop. So I will conclude by saying that, for me, the initiative is an extraordinary initiative. I'd like it to succeed, and I think the best way for it to succeed would be for three things to happen. One, for the group to decide early on what external risks it wishes to focus on. Two, based on that, to decide what network of risk officers could help in addressing each and every one of those risks. And finally, that we remember that we're all speaking English here, some interpretation, but that there are almost 7,000 other languages being used, and that we should think about how we can communicate the messages that we learn here to the citizens all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. One, just to come back to the corruption issue, one of the proposals which came out of the meeting, and there were so many proposals, is why not over the next years, what's technically completely possible, is to introduce a cashless payment system. So to abandon banknotes and coins, which would certainly the fight against corruption and against money laundering make much more easier. This is a type of ideas born here, and certainly the time might not be ripe for the moment, but in the next 10 years, I would say such ideas probably will mature. Now, Professor Woods, would you react to what has been said?
Sure. I think the Secretary General Noble's comments push us all to think about the difference between challenges and risks. You know, challenges that the whole world is working on because we know they're things that are definitely going to happen, and risks for which we need to build a certain kind of resilience. And certainly, Professor Takenaka, I think, gave us a really good definition for thinking about what resilience comprises, you know, prevention, preparation, recovery, and that this is a very good platform to think about those things. I think governments and international organizations and businesses on their own are quite good at thinking about challenges, and you're pushing us further to think about risks that perhaps lie both within those challenges but sometimes beyond them. I think that's a good rationale for this. I did want to just pick up on Minister van Schalkwyk's comments, because I think I so agree with what he said about the way of forcing people out of silos and to think in new ways, but in a nice way, in a way that we're all learning. It's not that anybody knows the whole story. We're all here to learn from each other, recognizing that we bring different experiences to the table. And I thought your comment that the WEF is now trying to move from being a forum that creates a shared aspiration, so bringing companies and governments and so forth to a table to develop a shared agenda. Now the challenge to make that have impact, the challenge to deliver that, is to think about what Robert Greenhill was earlier saying to me today, is the right architecture for that. And I think that is important, because the space between shared aspirations and delivery is a space when all kinds of things happen. Take, for example, the Global Fund, a wonderful public-private partnership forged through a set of aspirations that people came to. In the middle of the process of creating it, it could rather quickly, actually, have just become a commodity fund from which pharmaceutical companies would benefit from, in a very entrepreneurial but somewhat opportunistic way. And so keeping a structure together that keeps all the interests on the table, that keeps the public interests on the table, that keeps the shared aspiration on the table for which these new networks have been created, I think is really important. I think that's part of the challenge, and that the WEF has some important practices to share on that.
It's certainly a challenge, and if I would summarize what we have achieved here, I think we started a global mobilization here to reduce or to increase risk resilience on a macro and micro level. That's how I would see it. It's a movement. It's not an idea. Everybody was working on it. So we have created a movement with a clear purpose. It has a name, Risk Response Network, but it has a clear purpose. And the purpose is to strengthen risk resilience in a world, as Ambassador Hay said, which is characterized by much higher volatility, much higher, I quote another word which you used in another context, in a world of much greater togetherness. Now, let me just, if we have started here something which is substantial, we want to make an impact on the world. Let me just go around the panelists again and ask each, if you think in 4 or 5 years from now, we would be back and we would have to measure the success and the achievement and the progress, what would you like to see in let's say 3 years? I'm an impatient person, as everybody knows. What would you like to have achieved in 3 years with having created such a movement here in Dubai in 2010? Secretary General.
I'd like to come back to Dubai every year and to the United Arab Emirates every year. But for me, what I'd like to see is, I would like to know what kinds of networks exist or will have been inspired by this WEF initiative to focus on a variety of, as Mr. Steinberg said, external risks, because we're so focused on the internal risks that oftentimes we don't think about the external risks. So for me, the good practices, the best practice aspects of it, and knowing all the entities in the world that are focused on this, that might be able to help on issue A or issue B or issue C, from my perspective, would be a great success to come back to this great emirate and hear about and watch. Thank you.
Ambassador here.
Well, my message would, what I want to see is a higher level of togetherness. I want to explain myself a little bit on that. The responses to risks or challenges are very much diffused, nationally, regionally, from different organizations. But the success of these efforts are now very much hampered by the domestic agenda or political short-sightedness of nations. We need to have a better coordinated approach. We need to strengthen this togetherness. We are all in this together. If you do things according to your own agenda, you might undermine our collective efforts. I think that's the purpose of Professor Schwab's idea to create a platform where we all can plug into, seek ideas, and contributing our ideas to make sure it's a collective effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister?
Professor, the way that I understand the risk response network will work, and I think it will be a huge achievement, is that it should be able to have a proper basis of information, the potential to analyze that information, to disseminate it, but very importantly to detect early signs of crisis and then to propose management options. As you said in your earlier words, not one enforced decisions, but management options. If we achieve that in 3 years' time, I think it will be a major achievement. And in practical terms, if I can use two examples, there are some members of my council here. You referred to a cashless society. We asked the question, why is it not possible in a few years to make measurable progress with regard to an e-visa, globally speaking? It will be much cheaper, much more efficient. From a security point of view, it will be probably much better. We had a discussion in our council. During the time of the ash cloud over part of Europe, it was down to the CEO of British Airways to challenge government thinking, to say this is what the science really say. If we had this response network, it would probably have been much easier to deal with that. And I think in a sentence, it is in 3 years' time, we would like international organizations to take this risk response network seriously because of the quality of options that it produces.
Heizo.
Well, first I'd like to identify some or pick up some basic risk factors, risks, like earthquake, tsunami, some health issues, etc., etc. And then by 3-5 years, I'd like to share the best practices to fight against this kind of risk. This is the reason why I raised the need for initiative. At the same time, in this regard, I'd like to raise one footnote type of comment. That is, we should not forget the other side of the coin. This is the opportunity. We have now a lot of opportunities where risk management is needed, but we should not be risk averters. We should be sound risk takers. In that sense, our risk-opportunity balance should be considered very carefully in this network.
I was very often asked whether this terminology is not just highlighting the negative side, but I would say risk response means to a large extent that you are able to turn a risk into an opportunity. So it's a combination of risk response. Risk response is not something which is negative. It should be positive in creating out of the risk an opportunity.
Yes.
Professor Woods.
Well, Ambassador He highlighted the lack of confidence in governments, in their ability to cooperate with one another, as well as in multilateral organizations. And I think that's very important for resilience, for risk resilience. I would add to that that there's a lack of confidence within those organizations about what they can do. So the three things I guess I would like to see in 3 years' time that the WEF would have done is first to embolden the leaders of multilaterals to really cut through the staffing and budgeting and mandate problems that are paralyzing their agencies. If they're going to be part of the solution, they're going to have to really use all of their powers to make their agencies work. And I think the WEF could embolden them on that and then hold them to account and see in 3 years how much they've done. The second is that I think that you could empower your membership, companies, NGOs, governments, academics, to hold governments to account for their multilateral cooperation. And one simple way to do that, and it's an idea that came out of our council, would be to put together the global budget, the multilateral spend of governments, to make it really clear to the world, this is how much governments are spending on global health. This is how much they're spending on development. This is how much they're spending on fragile states. In other words, to inform in a way that would empower your membership to start really building a confidence in multilateral cooperation that comes from that kind of information. And the third thing I'd like to see the WEF do that I think could be delivered in 3 years' time is to start harvesting and comparing best practices about public-private collaboration in delivery. Even in the last 2 days, I've heard about water companies, I've heard about logistics companies, I've heard about airline companies, I've heard about a range in different sectors of public-private cooperation that's working, for example, in development. What I haven't heard is what those different sectors experience, how it compares, and what they might be learning from one another. I'm sure that is somewhere in the WEF, but I think forging some best practices on that so that we can, in 3 years' time, take a look at them would be very useful.
Could I ask you a question, please? I'm sorry, I'm a Secretary General. I have an organization I run. Whenever a proposal comes, I've got to ask practical questions. What we've proposed that we'd like this group to achieve in 3 years, I want to know how many people, how many human beings are going to be working as part of this risk response officers network in a World Economic Forum, because the task that we've identified for them in 3 years is mammoth from my perspective. I would also like to identify, there are 2 people in the audience, I believe, Rob Wainwright, who's the director of Europol, and Mick Kilty, who's the former commissioner of police for Australian Federal Police. There are institutions and people here in this forum with expertise and experience on how to deal with risks of a variety of options, and I think they should be enlisted in their institutions as well. Thank you.
I think, Secretary General, you make a key point. We start here a journey. It's not the World Economic Forum who can deliver all those promises, because it's just too challenging. But we can do so if everybody joins in this journey. And I know it's very difficult to go from an idea into implementation, but I have to say at the World Economic Forum we have done it already once when we brought together our different communities to start initiatives. And there are a number of initiatives which were mentioned, like the Global Fund, Gavi, and so on, which in some way was the Global Compact, which in some way had the origins in Davos and were driven by the community itself. So we have to rely very much on all of you. And I just would like to test, to make a test. Please, those who want to join on this journey, raise your hand. I know nobody will dare not to do it, but let me see. Please raise your hand. You see, we can do it. We can do it. So this meeting has given birth, I think, to something which can be rather unique, which can make a great contribution to the world, which can engage you all. And I would like to thank you first, the participants, the members of our Global Agenda Councils, for the great work, for your engagement, for your commitment, which was exemplary and which provides us with the confidence at the forum that we can do it. We will do it. Second, I would like to thank all the panelists here for not only having shared in these final sessions their concluding views with us, but having been, I know, very actively involved throughout the discussions since nearly 3 days. I want to thank very much the two co-chairs, His Excellency Sultan bin Zayed Al Mansouri, the Minister of Economy of the United Arab Emirates and co-chair of this meeting, and His Excellency Sami Al Kamsi, the Director General of the Department of Economic Development of the Government of Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and also a co-chair. But I want to express our particular gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates and ruler of Dubai, who has given us the honor to be with us at the opening session. And I know he's a great supporter of what we are doing here, and all our gratitude goes to him. But I also would like to particularly express my words of thanks to His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Abdullah Al Gargawi, the Minister of Cabinet Affairs of the United Emirates. He and I, since now many years, were discussing how we could create a synergetic effort in the framework of the World Economic Forum's mission, improving the state of the world, and in the framework of the special role Dubai and the United Arab Emirates are playing in the world. So thank you, Mohammed, for all the support since so many years. And in this and here, I think some special expression of gratitude should go to Abdullah Nasser Lota, the Secretary General of the Emirates Competitive Council, who has worked together with us not only in terms of our competitiveness research work, but who played a major role in making this meeting happening. And I should include all the numerous collaborators. I have to say I have participated and chaired many meetings in the last 40 years, but I seldom have seen a meeting where the people have been so supportive, so friendly, and I think it had a great impact on the work atmosphere which characterized our efforts over the last days. So please let me join me in expressing to the hundreds of people, the invisible hands, particularly applause. And here I would include, of course, also the staff of the Jumeirah Group, great hospitality, great service, and the police forces and security teams. We take it for granted. We take it for granted, but it is not to be taken for granted. Also, a special thank you to the University of Dubai for hosting the first open forum in the region. In order to create transparency for what we are doing here, just for those who are not informed, we had public sessions involving some of you at the University of, at the American University of Dubai, and this is one of our guidelines that what we should do, we should make as transparent as possible. And in this respect, I thank also the media who has accompanied us for the last 2.5 days. And finally, I have here about 200 people from the forum with me, and I cannot mention everybody, but the responsibility for building up this risk response network is now with Kevin Steinberg, and I think he has done a great introduction this morning. So I would call her the mother of the Global Agenda Councils, Marthinus, who works so hard. Our new risk expert developing some of the tools, Elaine Doczynski, Lee Howell, who played a major role in creating the program, and I have to confess to you, we had quite some discussions because this was a new approach to the program. It worked very well, thanks to you, and it provided an excellent base for interaction. And finally, on the more organizational side, Malte Gottperson, who made sure we take it also for granted that all the technology is working flawlessly. We take a whole team from Geneva here. And on the organizational side, Denis Burnet, Jean-Loup Denerien, and Edin Noureddin, who I think worked day and night. So it was a great meeting, a great start for a new venture, for a new journey, and I'm looking forward to the next station. No, I shouldn't say so. One of the features of this journey will be that we are in continuous interaction, And to conclude our session here, I just may ask Minister, His Excellency Minister Sultan Al-Sayed Al-Mansouri to address us and to conclude officially our meeting. Minister.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What a wonderful ending. Great. I very much look forward for the next one. Your Excellencies, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Government of the United Arab Emirates, I sincerely thank you all for participation in the Summit on the Global Agenda. My special thanks to Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and the entire team at the World Economic Forum for their support in hosting the summit here. Their hard work and dedication played a key role in making the summit a powerful meeting of the minds. The recommendation of the summit will be the blueprints for the action plans drawn up next month at the World Economic Forum in Davos clusters. We in the UAE are honored to have hosted the summit on the global agenda successfully for the third consecutive year, and look forward to hosting the summit in Abu Dhabi, our capital city, in early December of next year. The choice of our country as the venue for the summit is a testament to the emerging role of the nation in advancing the dialogue about global concerns. Strategically located between the East and the West, the UAE thrives as a hub for global commerce and a meeting for culture. We remain committed to using this geographic advantage to promoting a coming together of civilizations in order to address the real and urgent challenges we all face. In today's globalized world, a joint approach to tackling these problems is paramount. If there is one hard lesson we have learned from the global financial crisis, it is that nations and their economies do not function in isolation. Over the last 4 days, thought leaders and innovators from governments, from businesses, and from academia have shared their insights on the challenges that lie ahead. They have shown us that just as our economies are interlinked, so too must be our solutions. The discussions here have underscored new global realities. The thought leaders have cautioned us that we cannot ignore the new world order, where the power is shifting from the west to east and north to south. The global financial crisis was the result of structural changes which the world chose to ignore. We have all learned from the experience. The most important outcome of this summit is that we have agreed as one global community on the need to rethink, rebuild, and rearrange our economies and societies. We need to strengthen our focus on education and innovation for our youth population, who are our prime asset. The summit also emphasized the need to enforce stronger corporate governance frameworks and risk management strategies, which will be instrumental in determining the path of growth in the coming decades. Leadership will also play a critical role, and we must invest in our talent and in leadership development. Another focal area is the sustainable use of resources, which are becoming scarce with every passing year. The challenges faced by the world are real, but we must not shy away from them. In the UAE, we have proved that decision action is imperative in addressing challenges. We urge our compatriots across the world to act wisely and decisively. The price of inaction will be huge. The summit has indeed been a highly engaging experience for leaders from the public and private sector in the UAE, as well as for our local community. It has given the UAE global benchmarks with which to measure our progress in such fields as renewable energy, climate change, competitiveness, corporate governance, energy security, intellectual property rights, and internet security. For the UAE, the discussions at the summit have provided valuable inputs in our quest to achieve the goals of the UAE vision of the 2021, which aims to position the nation among the best countries in the world by the year 2021, which is the golden jubilee year of the formation of our country. By the way, tomorrow is our national day, the 2nd of December. UAE is going to be 39 years old. Thank you. Thank you. I express our sincere appreciation and gratitude to the World Economic Forum for choosing the UAE to host the summit again. I would also like to say a big thank you to the silent soldiers who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event happen. The Department of Economic Department in Dubai, headed by my fellow co-chair, His Excellency Sami Al-Gamzi, contributed immensely to making this event such a remarkable success. Another person, Abdullah Ruta, from the PM office, who shies away always from the lights. Thank you very much, also you and your team. Well, likewise, my sincere gratitude also goes to our partners from both the government and private sector, without whom we would not have seen such great outcomes in this world-class event. I look forward to seeing you in Abu Dhabi next year. I truly thank you for being here today. Thank you very much.